I'd love to talk to you about your projects and what you're doing. So fill me in on the Apapacho and what that is and how you came up with it and what you hope to do with it.
Okay, well, I've been writing for a while, but on my birthday this year, I was at dinner with some friends, and two of them are Mexican. I live in Mexico, and one of them brought up the word apapacho, and I was like, "What is that?" And he started explaining that it's an ancient Aztec language called Nahuatl, and the meaning of the word is to embrace from the soul. I know, again, sorry, my cat, and I may have to lock her out. Anyway, but to embrace from the soul, and I was just obsessed with it, and we were talking about it, and I just wanted to know more about it. I couldn't stop thinking about the word, and then I started writing about it and just posting little blurbs on my Facebook and, also on Substack and in notes and then I started writing a series about it, called the Apapacho series, because I realized somewhere along the way many things of why it speaks to me so deeply. I realized it's something that I myself have been missing in my life. It's not just a physical thing to embrace. It's about actions. And I realized I had been missing it. I feel that the world is missing Apapacho. There's nothing that the world needs more now than Apapacho. And then as I started sharing the word with people at fundraisers or luncheons or, um, in my writing or, that I realized that people always would lean in and really want to know more about it. And after I would speak with them about it, they would say, "Can you send that to me? Can you send what you wrote to me?" And in my friend group, it started changing the way we interacted with people, with one another, where we interact on a much deeper level, more deeper connection, and we hug with, and we always say mucho apapacho when we greet one another or say goodbye. And I realized that the word is soul coded, as I explained. And I have since come to believe that the word is it 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 is a representation of what the original operating system of humanity is or was. And we were built for tenderness, which is what apapacho is, to connect with others with tenderness. And our society has gone so far away from that, through industrialization, then technology. It moves us further and further from our humanity. And I am on a mission to make Apapacho a world movement because I think that we've drifted so far that we need to come back to the basics of what it means to be human.
So in Mexico, they use it as sort of like a greeting. When you hug someone, you say mucho apapacho, or like, how do they typically use that word?
They don't typically use that word. It's
Okay.
I mean, some people will use it, and say, um, like mucho apapacho, but it's not so normal to use the word. That's why I had never heard it before. And actually, some of my Mexican friends who have lived in the States for a while forgot about the word. Like I have one, she saw what I wrote about it, and she is from Oaxaca, and then Nahuatl lived just outside of Oaxaca still. And she called me after she read it and she said, what you wrote is so beautiful. She said, I forgot about that word and how beautiful it is, the meaning. She said, and the Nahuatl lived near where she's from in Oaxaca, where she still goes quite often, but she had completely forgotten. And most Mexicans know the word and use it, but some really have forgotten it. But the thing about the word is Mexico is Apapacho. The country and the way the culture is they're very much about connection and they really do embrace and reach out. That's part of why so many foreigners love moving here is because the Mexican culture is so warm and inviting. She's back. And maybe. But the culture is embodies Apapacho truly. And, I write about the cultural memory. Maisie, for God's sake. I write about the cultural memory of Apapacho. So back in ancient times, communities relied on one another. You know the saying, it takes a village. That was how people were raised in communities. it took a village to not only raise children, it took a village to support one another, it took a village to survive. People were dependent on the community. You know, as you know, and as progress took place and civilization progressed, um, you know, it became more fragmented. There was more distrust of outsiders instead of the support. But in those days, they needed to distrust outsiders. Now we don't have that issue with safety, with, you know, like tribes coming in and harming your village. So, you know, it's a different world now, but we've gone so far away from community with the disintegration of the family and, you know, people being very wary of uh, people that aren't like them. And, you know, they shouldn't be. I mean, we're all the same, just from different places, you know, but we need to go back to embracing not just our own, but others as well. I mean, that's what the world is missing is care for one another. And it's not just a interpersonal experience, it can also be applied to business. You know, I've also put together some consulting frameworks for specific types of business, applying the Apapacho principle.
And how would a business incorporate that into their framework?
But I don't want to give away too much of it because it's
Okay.
proprietary. But you know, I apply it specifically to hospitality is where I'm looking to test it.
Okay.
I have a lot of background of the fringes of hospitality and know a lot of people in that industry. And it's a very competitive industry, very competitive for occupancy and on the luxury level, which is where I'm targeting with this framework. All things being equal, there's real, you know, all the luxury brands pretty much all have the same offerings. They all have great locations, they all have great restaurants, they have great service, you know, amazing beds and bedding and spas and everything. There are just small points of differentiation anymore for them to stand out. They need to find a way to connect with people that make people want to come back. You know, and it's same with any company. You know, the thing is, you know, we prioritize efficiency over connection.
Yeah.
And when people are just relentlessly expected to perform and there's no connection on the human level, people burn out. And we need to go back to treating people as humans. You know, I mean, people have in any business environment, they have their challenges in their life and it may affect their work, but you know, management needs to find a way to realize that maybe somebody's a little off and speak to them, you know, from a human perspective and say, you know, like what's going on in your life, you know, how can we help you through this? You know, I mean, it make people feel like they're valued, not like they're just a, you know, relentless machine to produce. That's not what we're built for. That's what creates that's what creates burnout and people don't perform at their highest level when they're drained like that. You know, when people feel enriched and seen is when they perform their best, whether it's in a work environment, a relationship, or whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I've definitely enjoyed working in places where there was that human connection was stronger. You know, wherever that was stronger, that's where I've enjoyed working the most. I think the tricky part is trying to teach or educate management or, you know, the environment to interact in the papacho way that you're referring to.
Yes, but there's a big movement out there already with many business leaders called conscious leadership, and where they do work towards that, but it's more abstract. You know,
Mm.
where Apapacho gives it a more architectural framework and takes it to another level and it's based in ancient wisdom. So it's not something that's just manufactured. And when I started taking what I was writing in the Apapacho series and distilling from that into like business thought leadership on LinkedIn, yeah, when I first set up my account, I hadn't had a LinkedIn account for like 12 years. So I literally had zero connections. And I very deliberately sent in mails to five of the top thought leaders in the world, the top ones. I just went straight to them and a little in mail about, what I was doing with the Apapacho. And the top thought leader in the world on day two of my posting with only one connection accepted my connection request. For
Wow,
those
that's
type of
yeah.
people, they get hundreds of requests, but they accepted it because something in it spoke to them at some level. It was connecting to what they are, what their mission is with conscious leadership. So it piqued their interest. And I do believe that's that soul coding in that word that people on a subconscious level, they recognize it, though they don't know why. And then after that one, other top thought leaders started accepting my connection request. I only now have 31, but they're some of the, top people in that segment. So they're interested in how it relates to what they're already putting out there is conscious leadership, but it takes it to another level.
So had you always been a writer, or how did you generate the ideas for these articles? How did that writing come about?
Well, no, I've never been a writer. What happened is, I know it sounds a little weird, but it's the truth of it is, basically for the last 20 years of my life has been dismantling. And when I say dismantling, it's not just I've suffered losses. I've suffered losses across every aspect of my life has just broken down. And everything I thought I was, everything I thought I had is, it's not, and I don't have, and I am not, it's all been dismantled. And the two hardest years of my life have been the last 2 years. And through that, when I moved to San Miguel, I was already living in Mexico, in another part of Mexico, for 6 years. And when I moved to Mexico is when the real depth of the dismantling started, because in the States, we live such a fast paced life. And when we encounter grief or trauma, or, we all have trauma from our childhood at some level, but, whatever we need to process, we don't really get to process in the States because you just have to keep going. You have to pack it away and keep going because there's no time to stop. Life is so fast paced, we can't even sit with ourselves long enough to feel what we're really feeling. And when I moved to Mexico, I wasn't expecting this, but life got really much slower, and I was able to listen to myself and feel what I had not been able to feel all my life to that point, and process it. And, and the dismantling really sped up. And then, so when I came to San Miguel, I would say that I was on the edge of the cliff, and I had hoped that San Miguel would be an easier road for me, but it actually pushed me off the cliff. And it was the two hardest years of my life. But through that came the writing. And when I say I know this sounds strange, but it's the truth of it is I don't believe my writing is, I believe it's transmission, because I think that all that dismantling had to happen for me to be able to have a clear enough channel to receive that message. And I do believe it is transmission, because there's no way I could write as much as I wrote that is so such complete frameworks, such complete architecture, such a complete series with a coherent across every series I've written, and they all link together without it being transmission. But regardless of how it came, it came through the suffering.
So where were you living in the US prior to your move? And what were
I
you
was in
doing?
I was in Denver right before the move, and just a little backup on when the dismantling started in my life. Like in 2008 was when it all began. So in 2008, I was living in Dallas, and I was working in the interior design industry for a showroom, to the trade, a real high end showroom to the trade. And I had started out in that industry doing hospitality sales. So I was calling on design firms that did like 5-star and up hotel projects around the world. And, I was very, very successful in that. And the showroom I worked for, designed their own products as well as representing multi-line. And I always had a real eye for design. Well, the owner of the showroom, he was brilliant in designing furniture and lighting, and he took a stab at designing fabrics. And he doesn't have a real good color sense. So when he showed me, I was like, because I sold most of the fabrics in the showroom, I was like, oh no, that's, not going to work. I said, let me take a try at it. So I ended up designing a fabric line for the showroom. He invested in a fabric line. I spent 2 years designing that, traveling the world, going to fabric shows, meeting with the top interior designers in the US, showing them the line in progress to get their feedback and build it towards, what they were looking for. And it launched in November of 2008. It was the first time in my life that I was doing something that actually fed my soul, and it was a huge opportunity for me. And November 2008, when it launched, 2 weeks later is when the economy officially was dead in the US. So it was like I had the rug pulled out from under me because most of the numbers on what we were projecting for that line were dependent on hospitality sales to big hotel projects that where I had the background, but all the funding for all that dried up, not just for hotels, but luxury spending dried up. And within a year, I had created a niche for myself in that industry. And I was always good at that in whatever I did. I mean, if there wasn't a road to what I wanted, I would build the road. I'd find a way to build it. And in that industry, I came in with no experience, but I ended up creating a niche in that industry where I was designing the fabric line and other things, but I was making 5 times the average pay in that industry, which was great. But when the economy crashed, that ended up being a real problem for me because I couldn't find it. I was used to making that money. I was living at that level and I couldn't find a job making half of what I was making or half of half or half of half of half because it was so beyond what the average was. And I was considered overqualified for any of the regular positions. So what I had created for myself essentially shut me out when the economy crashed.
And
And
so when did you decide like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Mexico?"
it wasn't so that I lost my job in nine and I lost everything over time. Because I could not find a job, and to stay afloat. So I took all my savings and 401k out to try to start a company. And that's a long story, but I ended up in the end losing everything, literally everything. And I then moved to Denver a couple of years later, and I was in Denver until 2017 is when I decided to move to Mexico, but I wasn't planning to move to Mexico. I was very um, unhappy with my life because for 2 careers I was in the wine business before. Wine industry was my first career and then interior design. And for 2 careers, I was on the road all the time traveling, especially when I lived in Denver. I was on the road constantly. And I enjoyed it more when I was younger, but I had no balance in my life. I didn't have a lot of friends, because I was always gone. And I was just tired. I wanted some more stability in my life. And I was trying to think, like, how could I possibly make that happen without taking a big pay cut? And I did not know the answer. I was thinking maybe in 10 years, like I'll move to Costa Rica. And I went for a vacation to Mexico by myself. I had never been in Puerto Vallarta. And when I was there, it rained torrentially the entire week. I was there during hurricane season and there was a tropical storm in the area. So I really never saw much or did much except go to a timeshare presentation. And they said, well, if you could be here, because that was in September, they said, if you could be here in 2 months, you should come work for us. If you could be here in 2 months for high season, that would be great. They really didn't want that was part of the sales pitch. But went back, I quit my job and I moved to Mexico 2 months later, did not take that job. I had planned when I moved there, I didn't want to do timeshare. I wanted to open a furniture store, but I needed to understand the market first. So I did timeshare in the meantime. But I literally moved there 2 months after making a very quick decision. And I moved there knowing no one. I didn't even have a place to live. I stayed in an Airbnb for a week and found a job and a place to live in a week.
Wow, that's an adventure right there.
Yeah.
Just
And you
picking
know
up
what?
everything and just going there.
Yeah, and I always say that, Mexico, my years in Mexico have been some of the hardest years of my life, but I wouldn't trade them for anything. I mean, I wouldn't want to leave Mexico for anything
Now
because it
it's
is so apapacho. It holds you even in your hardest times.
so it sounds like the pace of life there is just a little bit slower. People take their time. You really get to enjoy life a little bit more there. Is that the same in the big cities in Mexico, or is that kind of just where you have lived?
Well, I mean, it's a little different in the big cities, of course. Like Mexico City has over 26 million people. So it's a little different, but I think just in general in Mexico, it's different from the States in many ways. Part of why I moved too, I mean, there were so many reasons, but part of why I moved is and I was a big consumer, so I don't mean that as a criticism for anyone. It was more a criticism of myself and just a emptiness I felt with it. But I was a very big consumer but the US the culture in the US is consumerism. I think and I tell people this all the time is I think people in the States have such there's a hole somewhere that they feel they feel the need to fill, but they don't really because they can't stop and really process what they're feeling. They try to fill it with stuff. And plus, with marketing and everything, it's constantly in your face. Buy and you'll feel better. And if this doesn't make you feel better, buy this and you'll feel better. So it was constantly the newest phone, a new car every 3 years, like the designer clothes. It's just all about, buy to fill that emptiness, but the emptiness is always there. And I just happened to recognize that nothing I was doing was filling that emptiness. And for me, that emptiness was lack of connection because, people are so busy in the States, they don't really connect deeply. And Mexico is very family oriented. So family is always number one. It's not, that's changing a little bit with the younger generations, but it's not a real consumer driven society because it's not a credit society, it's a cash society. So people here buy what they can afford and pay for in full. So most
So,
Mexicans own their car outright. They don't buy a car
oh, I
until they
see.
pay cash, and same with the home.
Oh, it's the same. Okay, wow, I did not know that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I always tell people because we have a lot of misconceptions about Mexico in the States. And I always tell people because I'm a real estate agent when, I'm working with clients and they ask me a lot of questions, I always say that, and this is true, the average Mexican you see walking down the street is worth more than the average American you see coming out of a luxury car with designer clothes. They're maxed out on credit, the American, whereas the Mexican who looks just average and is not driving the luxury car, they own their home, they own their car outright, they own everything outright. So they are liquid. And so it's a different life here, and I did say that with the younger generations that's changing a little bit more towards consumerism, but in general it's been that way. And so people are more focused on connection, not about stuff, because they understand the stuff doesn't fill the hole.
Yeah, that's a great insight there. So, yeah, so tell me what you hope listeners or what you hope companies who are listening to this might get out of the articles that you've been writing and Apapacho.
Well, since I was introduced to Apapacho, I've realized it's really the foundation of everything I was writing anyway. And I've had a lot of revelations about Apapacho as I work with it. And as I mentioned, I feel that it truly is a soul coded word, but that it's the original human operating system. And, that's what we were built for. But I write, typically my writing process is I'm a systems thinker. So my writing process typically starts with a personal frustration. And I'll give you actual example from the other day. I was very frustrated with the algorithms on Substack and LinkedIn because, I write deep, thoughtful stuff. I'm not posting for the immediate, engagement or to go viral or anything. I write what I write and I'm not gaming the system, to get all the likes and visibility. But initially, my visibility was going crazy. Like it was, the momentum was building, it was doing great. And then all of a sudden, the algorithm changes and it's like you are just writing into the void, and it's constantly happening. And then you get some momentum again and then it changes again. And, I just kind of had a breakdown and I'm like, I can't stand this. Like I'm not gonna try to game the algorithm, I mean, that's just not who I am. That's not what I write. And then I stepped back from that and kind of deconstructed, the whole thing because algorithms learn from our behavior and what we do, how we interact on any platform teaches the algorithm. So I started realizing that technology is just a mirror of our humanity because it's mirroring what we're teaching it. And that being said, it's a sad statement for our humanity because I use AI a lot to after I write to give me some feedback, and I use several different AI models, and I started with Chat GPT, and I was very frustrated with Chat GPT because I'm a straight shooter. I want the truth. I don't want someone to tell me what I want to hear. I want the truth. And Chat GPT couldn't do that. And finally it said to me that it's not programmed for that it's programmed for what most people want, and that is to be told what they want to hear. And that just hit me so hard because I was like, wow, like that's a really sad statement for humanity if most people just want to hear what they want to hear and not the truth. I mean, that's disturbing to me. It's disturbing. It might not be to other people, but to me, that's very disturbing. And yeah, it's just, writing about technology and how it works with the algorithms. It's, the algorithm, none of the technology and how it works is circumstantial. We teach it, but it's also created so that the deeper things get buried and the things that can actually change people for the better, they are algorithmically buried. And what keeps people in that surface loop is what is elevated through the algorithms. And that's part of the control of humanity too, is, not only are through that control, we are falling in line with it. We're just buying right into it and playing along with what the powers that be want us to do, and that is to lose our humanity.
So it sounds like the algorithm was working for a while for you and then it stopped working. You got frustrated. So how did you decide to move on from that? It sounds like, were you just like, okay, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing? It doesn't matter what the algorithm is doing, or how did you get out of that frustration?
Well, I never get out of that frustration. I mean, because it's not just one time. It's over and over this happens. And, and I had just kind of hit my breaking point with it that day. But, I'll never game the algorithm because that's just not who I am. And I'll just keep posting what I post, and those who are meant to find it will find it. But I'm not one for promoting myself like all over the place or, gaming an algorithm or diluting my message. I will never dilute my message to have visibility. And I'm just very true to what I write about. But that whole frustration, when I wrote technology is a mirror of our humanity, then I realized that that was begging for another series to be written about how we lost our humanity. And so that series is in the works right now, but that will be about, I'll speak to how we originally lost it, why we lost it, and how we can come back to it. But, the world is so fragmented right now, and people feel so alone. Technology connects us so deeply, yet it keeps us so profoundly disconnected. And we are moving more in that direction of disconnection. I mean, how many times are you in a restaurant and you see people sitting there, whether it's a family or two people, and they're sitting through the whole meal on their phones, not even talking to each other? I mean, that's how much more disconnected can you be? We're so connected through our phones, yet we're so disconnected on a personal level. It's very disturbing for me, because that takes us away from caring for other people. The more we disconnect like that, the more self-focused we become, and we have no empathy or care or compassion for anybody else. It shows in the fragmentation in politics. It shows in how people just walk right past people who are hurt. They don't even, inquire if they're okay or try to help. I mean, it's just really scary to me what the world is coming to. And I think we really need to step back and go back to our original operating system of care from the soul. It's that people speak a lot about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is profoundly important, but this is taking it to another level of soul intelligence, or I call it the fifth intelligence. I write about the fifth intelligence, and that is the intelligence of soul level care for one another. And that through that, the coherence of that care, those types of systems are the ones that don't break, is when there's care beneath the system that is the foundation of the system. That's when a system doesn't break, whether it's a family system or a business system, any type of system. It applies across all different types of things. But, care is the foundation of building architecture that has longevity.
Well, that is awesome. I am looking forward to seeing how you incorporate that into the consulting and the frameworks. I would love to learn more about how that's done more, I guess, like on a step by step basis. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Well, on Substack, my profile is the altar, ALTAR, of becoming. And I am posting three different series simultaneously on there. So on Tuesdays, I post the Apapacho series, which is the entry into Apapacho. And it's structured, that series is structured where it has some essays that are about the foundation or architecture of Apapacho, and some are what I call the challenges. So it's like I challenge you to redefine leadership. I challenge you to redefine wealth through the lens of Apapacho. But like to give you an example, I challenge you to redefine wealth was the first essay in that series. And we define wealth by material goods or bank accounts or those types of things. But, what's the most important in wealth really is relational wealth, and how the imprint we leave on others through our care and our interaction with them, and the imprint others leave on us through their care and interaction. Like when you're laying on your deathbed, what are you going to be thinking about? Are you going to be thinking about your bank account and counting how much money's in it? You're going to be thinking about how you touched other people or how they touched your life. And oftentimes people don't have good memories. They think about how they failed in connecting with people in their lives, and it's regret. Because, there's a lot of studies with people on their deathbeds where they say, the most important thing is not to have regrets. But we just power through life without thinking about, the imprint we leave on people and that legacy of our interaction and our care and how people remember us through how we engage with them and interact with them. That's much more important than material things. But we've become a society that all we value is material things. So I'll give you an example of something. The second essay is called The Hidden Architecture of Apapacho. And I have a new friend here, and she's lived here maybe 4 months now, and she is an artist and she's a writer and she loves words. Actually, her home is called Casa Palabra, which means word in words. And so when she has people over to her home, she doesn't want you to bring wine or food or anything except words. So the first time she had a gathering at her house and she invited like 8 women and well, just to back up and explain how those people met. I'm a connector. I have my one of my things I'm most wealthy in is relational wealth. I know how to connect people because I see the invisible things that connect people and how who should be introduced to who. I've when I was younger, I used to fix people up all the time. 5 couples I fixed up got married, 4 are still married. It's a pretty good track record. But I see the same, just with friendships. So one of my friends has a vineyard here, and they were having the grape harvest celebration, which is a big party, and I invited 15 friends to it. None of them knew each other. Some of them had met very briefly, but they didn't know each other. And there was magic that happened that day. It was just, you've had those moments where everything just gelled so perfectly with the people you were with, and everything was just perfect. It was like that night. And so that woman who just moved here the next night, she invited like 8 of us to her home. And she told us, like when people come to my home, I only want you to bring words. So bring something either you wrote or, that is significant to you. It could be as little as a quote or something deeper. So, some people were comfortable with it, some people weren't. Like one woman brought a Rumi poem that was very important to her and explained why before she read it. Another woman brought song lyrics that were very meaningful to her and she explained why before she read them. Another woman brought a quote that she loved. I wrote I wrote a series, my first series on Substack was How Mexico Saved Me, and I brought the first essay from that series. Another woman had just been introduced to AI and she gave AI 3 facts about herself and asked AI to tell her about herself. And it wrote this beautiful thing that she said was like it was reading her soul. So, anyway, as each person read through whatever they were brought to share that day, I mean, it gives you a glimpse into who people truly are when they share something like that, unlike a typical gathering where people are just talking surface stuff and drinking. It was a evening of beautiful connection. And then I found out that that woman not only doesn't allow people to bring anything but words to her house, but when she goes to other people's homes, she only brings words because she refuses to do anything but connect profoundly with people. And we are so uncomfortable with that as a society because we've moved so far away from that that I find it so beautiful, like to come back to that.
Yeah, I love that story. It's so unique. I've never heard of anything like that before, and I might just start incorporating that too. It's such a
Yeah,
wonderful way to get to know people on a deeper level is when you do that, things like that.
absolutely. Actually, I posted a challenge on my private Facebook page, to all of my Facebook friends to incorporate that in their lives. I don't know that anybody has, but I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, those are the moments that are you remember.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show. Really great to talk to you again. I'll be sure to share all your handles on the videos and on the links so that people can get in touch with you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I really appreciate you having me on the show, and it's great talking with you again as well.
Yeah, same here.